My brother-in-law had a grocer's shop. He used to buy apple jam for me every day. As soon as I ate it, I would lose control, and I would want a man. I wanted to establish a relationship with a man because my brother-in-law used to mix a special recipe in the jam. You would be amazed to know why he did that. I was sitting in the courtyard washing clothes when suddenly I felt as if someone was looking at me. When I looked up, I was surprised. My brother-in-law was there on the roof and was smiling at me. I had been noticing for a long time that his behavior had deteriorated. Now he did not respect me like before, nor did he look down at me like before. In fact, whenever he spoke to me, his words would have many meanings. I would ignore his words even if I didn't want to because he was very loved by everyone in my in-laws. Since he was the youngest son in the house, everyone would pamper him. Even my mother-in-law wouldn't let anyone say anything against him. My husband also loved him very much and would instruct me to take care of him. I completely ignored him. After a while, he came down and sat near me. At that time, I was completely without a dupatta. I got worried when he suddenly sat close to me. I quickly straightened my dupatta. He smiled and said, "There is no need to hide yourself from me. Who am I?" Hearing this, I looked at him with great anger. I told him that every man except my husband is forbidden for me. Hearing this, he started laughing openly and said, "Before you, I have seen many such women who consider their husband their whole world, but they are only a victim of my one and only. After that, they forget everything. They do not see anyone except me." Hearing what my brother-in-law said, I looked at him in confusion and asked him what you are talking about. After listening to me, he started smiling mysteriously and told me that not now, but after a few days I will tell you about it in detail. Not just tell you, but I will also feed you all that, so that you can also get the real taste of life. Saying this, he laughed mischievously and left from there. Seeing him laughing made me very angry. I wanted to tell him a lot of good things, but because of my anger, I was silent. My anger was coming towards me. Seeing this, I took a deep breath. I was not at all comfortable with this woman. She came near me and sat down and said to me that she was angry. I asked her what happened, and then after hearing what she told me, I felt like the seven heavens had fallen on my head. Actually, my husband's health had suddenly deteriorated in the office. My husband and my Nandoi used to work in the same office. When he took him to the hospital, it was found that my husband had cancer, and it was in the second stage of cancer. I left my clothes there, and while I was there, I went to my sister-in-law and begged her to take me to my husband. She consoled me and said that there was no need to worry. Everything can be controlled now, but you have to take great care of your husband. I nodded my head quickly after hearing her words. Tears were flowing from my eyes and my heart was beating very badly. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law's face was also spinning in my mind. If anything had happened to my husband, my brother-in-law would have scratched me, and I could not let that happen. After a while, when I was leaving the house, I suddenly bumped into my brother-in-law. He was also entering the house at that time. Seeing me, he started smiling. I glanced at my sister-in-law who had gone far away from me. My brother-in-law whispered in my ear and said, "The moment I was waiting for has come. That is, now you are completely alone. That is, you will soon be close to me." After hearing this, I spontaneously spat on his face. Suddenly, my brother-in-law's face turned red with anger. Soon, I realized my mistake. Before I could leave his side, he grabbed my arm tightly and pinned me to the wall. Saying this, he quickly went inside the room while I stood there and started breathing deeply. I did not know what had happened to my brother-in-law all of a sudden. Earlier, he was not like this at all. One day I showed him a picture of my college, after which his intentions had changed, although that was 5 years ago. Now I am not the same at all. Now, a lot has changed. But it seemed as if he was stuck on the picture from 5 years ago. I was deeply aware of my mistake that I should not have shown him that picture. I had done a great injustice to myself by showing him that picture. As soon as I reached the hospital, seeing my husband's condition, my heart ached very badly. In a single day, He had started looking very weak. Seeing me, he started smiling and comforting me by saying that you don't need to cry at all. Don't worry, I am not going to leave you. Hearing this, I quickly hugged him and said to him, "Get well soon and come back home because he cannot return home before 6 months." Before I could finish my speech, my uncle suddenly came there, and after hearing this, I felt like the ground had gone from under my feet. I could not spend 6 months without my husband. This was impossible for me. I looked at my husband in my anxiety, and he started looking away from me, which made me realize that whatever my uncle had said was absolutely true. It had only been 3 months since my marriage, and after 3 months, such a big disaster had happened. After hearing this bad news, my uncle left from there while I addressed my husband and started complaining to him that, "How will I spend 6 months without you?" He held my hand and comforted me by saying that you have to spend these months with patience and gratitude because if you want me to recover completely, I will have to get my treatment done. Suddenly, a suggestion came to my mind. I asked her if I could go to my mother's house. Hearing my words, she quickly shook her head in the negative and said that it was not possible. Actually, a while ago, I had received a call from my mother. Then I had suggested this to my mother because I knew that it would be difficult for you to spend your time there without me. But my mother strictly forbade it and even scolded me, saying that it has not been 3 months since my daughter-in-law came and you are sending her to your mother's house again for 6 months. Put this thought out of your mind and also convince your wife not to talk to me like this again. After hearing my husband's words, I dropped my head in both hands. He was thinking that perhaps it would be difficult for me to live without him. This was also true. But the most painful thing was that in my husband's absence, my brother-in-law used to be completely free, and after what I had done to him today, I was feeling very scared. I had seen the anger on my brother-in-law's face before. I had not seen him. His eyes had suddenly turned red, and he looked like a wild beast. If my Nanda had not been with me at that time, I could not think beyond that. I felt a shiver of fear. "What happened to you? What are you doing?" my husband started asking me. Hearing this, I quickly shook my head in the negative. I had forgotten that I was with my husband at that time. It had been a while since I had talked to him when suddenly my brother-in-law came there. Seeing me, he smiled mysteriously. Then he turned to my husband and said, "What is this, brother? You have been in the hospital for 6 months. What will happen to your beloved sister-in-law after you? Are you going to take care of her?" After listening to my husband's words, I quickly looked at his face, where a very sweet smile was spreading at that time. Of course, he did not know about his brother's deeds, so he was saying this with great pleasure. I wanted to open up about his brother in front of him right now. But at that time, I had no proof, and I also knew that he trusted his brother more than me. I had only been in his life for 3 months, while he had been spending 27 years with his brother. "Hey, brother, why are you worried?" "I will take care of my sister-in-law more than my own life." He was saying this very meanly. I understood his tone well, but for some reason my husband was not able to understand the hidden meaning behind his words. He was smiling at his words and was saying that I trust you. You will not disappoint me if my husband knew what he was comparing with taking care of me. So he would not have spent a minute in opening his head, but the problem was that how should I tell my husband? This brother of yours is a #1 scoundrel, and he is lying behind me. I was about to get up and leave when my husband held my hand and told me to sit next to him until I fell asleep. I sat quietly near him, and my husband closed his eyes. I looked up and looked at my brother-in-law, who was still looking at me with a smiling face, and then he made a very strange gesture which I understood after a long time. My heart felt like the earth would split and I would be swallowed by it. I had never felt so ashamed before today. I could not sit there for long and left as quickly as I could. I was standing in the gallery taking deep breaths when suddenly I felt someone behind me. I turned around and saw my brother-in-law there. He came close to me and said, "What do you think? Should I make a program tonight or tomorrow? Because tonight your husband will not be at the fort, and tomorrow your mother-in-law will not be there. Both these occasions are very good for us. I hope you will enjoy it a lot." Hearing this, I spontaneously raised my hand and left a mark on his face while he started smiling mischievously and said, "I can bear this small slap for whatever I am going to take from you. Not one, you can slap me in the face as many times as you want. It won't matter to me because after what I take from you, What is happening here?" Suddenly a lady doctor came there. She must have seen me slapping my brother-in-law, so she scolded my brother-in-law very angrily and said, "Why are you bothering this girl?" I told her that this is my younger brother. She doesn't need to be worried. She quickly apologized to us and left. I glanced at my brother-in-law when he was looking at me very angrily. Of course, he didn't like being called younger brother at all. While I was feeling happy in my heart, I had taken 2 steps when suddenly darkness began to appear in front of my eyes and I fell unconscious. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a bed. My brother-in-law was sitting nearby. He looked very worried on his face. Seeing me, he quickly moved towards me and said, "Now, tell me about your health." After listening to what he said, I looked at his face in surprise. Now there was no lust on his face, but worry. I couldn't even imagine that he could be worried about me right now. I quickly pushed him back and told him that you don't need to worry about me. I'm fine. Come on, go now quickly. Saying this, I forcibly sent him out of the room. He also left quietly. I was surprised that he left so quietly, but I wasn't showing my surprise to him. After a while, the doctor entered the room. I asked the doctor what had happened to me. Before the doctor could answer me, my brother-in-law came into the room again and kept the doctor busy with other things. After that, he took the doctor out with him. I was feeling very bad. My heart was beating very badly. I felt that something bad might have happened to me too. The nurse entered the room for the 3rd time. I asked the nurse and she comforted me and said that there was no need to worry. You had fainted due to low BP. Hearing this, I felt much more relieved. I lay there for a while. Then when I came out, Nand was there outside and took me towards the house. On the way, I was thinking about my brother-in-law. Suddenly, the car stopped, and he came inside the car and sat down. I took a deep breath because I realized that now I have to see him all my life. How could I protect myself from him? I had to think about him now. When I got home, I first went to my mother-in-law's room because she had to question me. As soon as I entered my mother-in-law's room, my mother-in-law started scolding me, saying, "I never thought you could be so careless. Your husband's health was so bad, but you didn't even pay attention to him. Because of you, his cancer has reached the 2nd stage. All this happened because of you." Hearing such things from my mother-in-law, my heart started crying tears of blood. I never thought that she could put the blame all on me. I tried to explain myself, but she scolded me and silenced me. At that moment, my brother-in-law entered the room and told my mother that she was not at all to blame for this. Don't take her side too much. I know very well whose fault it is. My mother-in-law was now out of control. My brother-in-law gestured to me and I silently walked towards my room. After going to the room, I cried a lot. I felt like crying over my helplessness, and at the same time, I felt like crying over my husband's condition. And then suddenly my brother-in-law's attitude became very good. I could not even imagine that a person could change so quickly. I don't know if he was scared because of his brother's illness or whatever it was. Now he didn't look at me the same way as before, but now he spoke to me with respect again. But I didn't know that this was just a trap in which I would risk my life. During these days, my mother-in-law had started living outside the house. I don't know where she would go and then return home at night. I tried to ask her, but she didn't think it was necessary to tell me about it and told me to focus on your work. My sister-in-law was also married. She used to come to my house very rarely before. Now, since my husband fell ill, she had stopped coming to my house completely. Now, she only went to the hospital to meet her brother. It felt as if she loved her brother. As far as my brother-in-law was concerned, he was always inside the house. He had also completed his studies some time ago and was now managing a grocer's shop. But for the past few days, he had left the boys at the shop and he himself did not know what he was doing in his room all day. He only came out to eat. Well, I was also a little worried because the fear I had when my husband fell ill had also gone. After a few days, he made a jam and told me that I made it with great care, taste it, and tell me how it was. After listening to him, I silently took the square from him. But I did not know how much injustice I was going to do to myself after eating it. I had just eaten it for a short while when suddenly my health started deteriorating. I was starting to feel a strange uneasiness. I couldn't help but let everything go to waste. Now I was starting to lose control. My brother-in-law was standing in front of me and smiling at me. Seeing him smiling like that, I started to see more. I couldn't help but want to get him somehow. I quickly moved towards him, but before I could surrender to him, the door of the room suddenly opened and she quickly entered the room with me. Seeing my mother-in-law entering the room at that time made me angry. I was wishing that she would disappear from here somewhere. I started abusing her in my heart. I was looking at her face very angrily, and I was automatically worried about my condition. I was not doing all this deliberately, but it seemed as if someone was forcing me to do all this. I told my mother-in-law to leave here right now. After hearing me, she started looking at my face with uncertainty. On the other hand, my brother-in-law was also worried. He had no idea that his mother would come back like this. He grabbed my arm tightly and locked me inside the room. My anxiety was not going to end. I remained like this for about an hour. After an hour, when my mind was able to think for itself, I started getting very angry with my brother-in-law. I could not bear to kill him. I could not even think that he could mix something like this in my food, because of which my hormones would go out of control. In the evening, I went to him and decided to talk to him bluntly. Before he could hear me, he got up and started telling me, "I love you very much. I fell in love with you the day I saw you for the first time. I wanted to get you somehow, but I did not understand any way. When you were not ready to surrender yourself to me, I made this medicine through which I could not only control you, but also your children." As he said this, he fell silent. I felt something was seriously wrong. I said, "Tell me the whole story." And then the hospital scene flashed through my mind. The doctor wanted to tell me something, but he kept stopping her. Before I could leave the room, he grabbed my arm and told me, "I will not let you bring this child into this world. You are mine alone. If this child comes into this world, then everything will end." He seemed like a crazy and savage person at that time. I freed myself from his grip. I did a wise thing by starting recording on my mobile at that time. When I came into his room to talk to my brother-in-law, and as soon as he started talking, everything he said was recorded. At least now I had a proof that I could show my husband. Now I was heading towards the hospital. My mother-in-law got worried seeing me leaving the house at that time of night, but I didn't care about anyone anymore. When I went to the hospital and told my husband about this, he started to bleed with anger. I told him that this is not the time to act out of anger, but with awareness. I told him bluntly that in this situation, I cannot stay at your house, and then with my husband's permission, I came back to my home. I am still grateful to my mother-in-law who left that day. If she had not come that day, I would have had nothing left. I got my checkup done by the doctor and he told me that you had taken a heavy dose. If you had taken 2 or 3 more doses, your child's life could have ended. Within 6 months, I was in my mother's house, and then after that I shifted to a separate house with my husband.